Divorce lawyers of Reddit, what's the most outrageous reason someone filed for divorce?
Silent scan.
My aunt was dating an unemployed dude for a while. He was staying in her house rent-free. They got married and were getting ready to go on the honeymoon when the new husband tells her he's not going because he has to take care of his plants at the house. Big fight. Aunt goes on the honeymoon with her sisters instead. She comes home and tries to kick him out of her house. He refuses to leave. She tries to get the police involved. Dude is live streaming on Facebook how he is being trapped in his own home. Police tell my aunt there is basically nothing they can do, can file for eviction after a divorce. Dude gets to live in her house with his precious plants for like 3 months until everything legally gets worked out.
Silent scan.
Pure illegal. A couple got divorced over a cat. Wife called cat Snowball because of white fur and only wanted the cat to eat wet food or chicken breast. Husband called cat Lily again because of white fur and believed it should only eat dry food. These two argued for a year over custody of the cat, but did not give a shit about their human kids aged 15 months, 4 years, and 6 years old.
Silent scan.
My 90-year-old client, the husband, and his son retained me to initiate divorce proceedings with his 88-year-old wife. They'd been married 60 years. The wife had recently taken to beating him with his own cane because their daughter poisoned her into thinking he was hiding money from them. The battle came down to husband and son versus wife and daughter. At their first court appearance, my client showed up in an old 1950s style pinstripe suit and fedora. He was a farmer his whole life, and this was clearly the only suit he owned. He was such a meek and lovely old gentleman. I had to pass my client on to a new lawyer midway through the proceedings because I accepted a job in a different country, but I understand the divorce was eventually granted.
Silent scan.
Colleague handled a case where money was not an issue, but the kids were. Neither parent wanted them.
Silent scan.
I represented a porn actress/webcam model who filed for divorce from her husband, who also did the porn/webcam model business. He would do gay porn on the side because the pay was better. She was hesitant about it, but dealt with it because the pay was decent. Both sides had an agreement that it wasn't cheating as long as it was for work. One day she came home early and found her husband in bed with 2 men. They were not filming. That was too much for her. Needless to say, the old conservative judge couldn't wrap his head around this one.
Silent scan.
My dad was a divorce lawyer. He had a client who wanted to divorce her husband for 2 reasons. 1. He did not have enough hair on his chest. 2. He did not drive fast enough. Keep in mind this was in the 70s when chest hair was a bit more important.
Silent scan.
She was kidnapped in Mexico and he refused to pay ransom. Eventually her family managed to pay, and she was left on the side of the road. It is not outrageous as in petty, but outrageous as how absurd that is. Edit to answer all the questions. I don't know how much they wanted as ransom, but it was substantial as the conversation between her family and him was how he had it liquid, and they had to liquidate investments to get that amount. She may have told me, she may not. Something in pesos and I didn't know the conversion rate. It was all a random number to me. This happened about 7 years ago. He wasn't with her on the trip. She was traveling with cousins and went downstairs alone to get ice cream and wait for them to get ready. I do not know all the details. She was extremely distraught talking about it, and it was not necessary to pry. It was clearly traumatic and even tough. I had a million more questions. I left it alone.
Silent scan.
Failed exorcisms. Client had an inner ear condition that caused chronic vertigo, but symptoms could be treated with medication. Husband was an evangelical who was convinced his wife 1. Had become possessed, and that her vertigo and general crankiness with his methods were evidence of demonic possession. 2. The medications she was taking was enabling the devil to hide inside her. And 3. The only proper recourse was exorcism. He would hide her meds until she got dizzy and then try various methods of exorcism. This included sweating it out, put under blankets, while incapacitated and locked in a room full of space heater. Freezing it out, pretty much the reverse with fans, and bags of ice. Surprising it out, he would jump out and scare her like it was the hiccups, but instead of yelling back quote boo, he would recite the Lord's Prayer or Psalms. The final straw was that he tried to back quote surprise it out of her by pushing her down the stairs when they were heading out for dinner. Note, this guy was some type of executive, and they still went out to dinner after the stairs incident. She asked for the divorce at an Applebee's that night. I have often tried to picture that conversation, as she was adamant that he was a total sweetheart and never acted out of malice or anger.
Silent scan.
Don't forget to like and subscribe to get even more awesome content. Come on, it just takes 1 second.
Silent scan.
Wasn't the reason, but it happened during the course of the divorce. Neither side would follow the court orders. When they had to go back to court, they were fighting over a pistol and the man's grandmother's bowls. I assumed for weeks that these bowls were some sort of heirloom or expensive china. When they finally brought the bowls in to swap, they were fucking Tupperware.
Silent scan.
My client was the outrageous one, so my heart went out to his poor wife. He had OCD, which manifested primarily financially, so he made their lives a penny pinching hell. Examples: he was obsessed with avoiding unnecessary driving, wear and tear on the car, gas expenses, so he cut the whole family's hair at home and never let them eat at a restaurant or go to the movies. Weirdest of all, he kept one toilet paper roll on him at all times, and you had to get one square from him before you could go to the bathroom. He never gave more than 1 square. Wife finally got fed up and left him when 1, he gave her bangs during an in-home haircut, and 2, their daughter was so traumatized by the toilet paper thing they couldn't potty train her. Also, he hated paying his divorce lawyer bill. He was also an old-fashioned mega-Catholic who considered divorce a deadly sin. He viewed my whole job as an unnecessary and sinful expense.
Silent scan.
Viralegal here. Still remember an early case I worked on. Man divorced his wife for her bingo addiction. 10 to 12 times per week she went to bingo. She was 82, he was 86. But the all-time greatest to 20-somethings, they were irreconcilable because he kept smoking her weed stash when she wasn't home.
Silent scan.
I'm a lawyer that handles quite a few divorces, among other things, and I've seen all sorts of reasons for marriages ending. The only thing that is consistently true and relevant to this question is that it is never for just one reason, and it is never one-sided. In fact, I've started telling potential clients in our initial interview that I'm well aware that I'm going to uncover some dirt on my client in the process, not to scare them, but to put their mind to ease. That I've seen worse. The fact that you haven't been 100% an angel up to this point doesn't scare me, and I'd rather find out about it from my client beforehand than later on from their spouse at the worst possible moment. All this is just to say that when you hear about people divorcing over one stupid argument or mistake, usually that's just the straw that broke the camel's back. That said, some of the lighter straws I've seen include a guy who is 100% convinced that his wife, our client, is actually a lesbian, in love with his sister and just using him as a cover, but he also claims she is having sex with me to pay for her legal fees, and with every male whose phone number is in her call history, a woman who is divorcing my client. Because he was too sad after his father died last year, my client had to break down her door to get his father's ashes a few weeks after he left the house, and she refused to let him back in or give them to him, and a woman who claims my client was emotionally abusive towards her because he refused to yell at her and sat in silence ignoring her when she screamed at him. He has this recorded, time-stamped for the dates and time she insists the incidents occurred, and she's listened to them, and his complete silence as she goes on tirades and insists this proves her point that he was emotionally distant and abusive.
Silent scan.
He was frustrated by her hoarding. She was frustrated by his utter uselessness. He filed for divorce, and she was my client. Her prized possession was a room or two full of scrapbooking materials. His prized possession was a yard full of junk cars that he never worked on. They had no children and no real assets. They hated each other more than any two people I'd ever met, and the only terms they would agree to were these: he gets the scrapbooking stuff and she gets the cars. My client also took the house, as he had no income and didn't want it anyway. It was the shortest divorce decree I ever drafted. I intentionally squeezed it onto one page, and the judge and I had a good laugh over it. Once the decree was signed and filed, she hauled all the scrapbooking stuff to the yard, and he removed it to the dump. She then called the junk shop I referred her to, and had all of his cars removed from the yard.
Silent scan.
Congratulations, you reached the end of this awesome video. Now, like and subscribe, like we talked earlier, come on.
Silent scan.